This is The Countdown, discussing tomorrow's news today as our top guests tackle the issues that matter with a sharp take on every story. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Weeks and Onyx Duncan.
A very good morning to you and welcome to another edition of The Countdown. My co-host, Onyx Duncan, is on the line as well. We have our guest in the green room. It's Sunday. It is the 8th of December. Can't believe it. It is 8th of December. Onyx.
It's almost Christmas, Andrew. Almost Christmas. And we didn't get the cash grants yet.
I didn't get the cash grant yet. Everybody's calling for this cash grant, boy. The line is long. The waiting is terrible.
Yep.
And the suspicions are growing. And so we await to see what's going to happen in 2025 when, or should it happen, that you are voting in Georgetown and another person voting for you in Region 9.
Exactly.
We'll find out because everybody going to be vigilant on that. There's some saying that no, they needed to. I just want to verify that you are who you say you are. But this government that you and I know about, we realize that what happened in 2020, they still believe that the opposition rigged. When they
we know that.
You are the riggers. When the recount shook, where the fraud was located, where the boxes were found on the East Coast, where a number of persons voted.
And Andrew, there were instances where the current Attorney General was sharing out ID cards allegedly in Monrepo.
Yes.
And we're not talking about that.
When they storm into GCOM office.
Exactly.
And push down the door and trying to get to the chairman of GCOM.
The president himself. You
know, people forgetting these things and you have the leader, the second vice president, jumping on Facebook every Thursday, saying all sorts of things when the country knows who were the real rigger. I'm not sure, if our MPs are doing a great job in highlighting these things over and over and over again, but we need to let the public know who are the real riggers in this country, because people believing that
who are the real riggers, exactly,
that the opposition is the riggers, and they're quiet some of the time. We need to let the country know again. At the recount showed who were the real rigger, and the chairman of GCOM was the one who also was in the fraud, who said, let everything come together. Let the fraud come with the good.
So, Andrew, what's our top stories this morning, man? What's our top stories this morning?
There's a lot of things going on this morning, man. I am seeing in the Starbuck News letter column that there's no provision in the NRF Act granting any role for the investment committee over withdrawal of funds. Now that's something we're going to talk about this morning, Mr. Jordan. All right. I
want to speak about Andrew. I saw this breaking news coming out of Travis Chase yesterday in regards to the immigration officer. This government is so barefaced in everything that they do. Whether it's rigging, whether it's just trampling on people's rights, this government is barefaced. How can you, as a government, and people in public office just trample on people's rights like that? And the world is seeing this. The Guyanese citizenry, they are seeing this, and you are not standing up. Come on, people, we have to stand up.
Yep, we got to stand up for something, or we'll fall for everything. I also seen in the Starbuck News in the front page this morning, it is telling us that 27 workplace deaths recorded up to November. 27 workplace deaths recorded up to November. We ain't talking about October. We ain't talking about the other months within the year. Just November alone, 27 persons died. Oh man, Also, we see in the culture news headlines, they're saying at least 34 killed in Gaza as Qatar holds hope for ceasefire. That's international. We also see an ExxonMobil free to sell assets being paid for by Guyanese to clean up.
That's the biggest headline for me.
Oh my word. ExxonMobil free. Free. No consequences, no payment. Free to sell assets being paid for by Guyana to clean up the oil spill. Free.
Somebody getting a cut. Somebody getting a cut.
Yeah, and they also show there too on X that the immigration officer transferred after allegedly letting Brutus' wife leave the country when the judge ordered it.
It's not transferred after allegedly. It's transferred. It's transferred.
Kaichor said allegedly allegedly letting Brutus' wife leave the country. And then we have also on the front page of the Kaichor News, implement windfall taxes. It is a common practice in the oil sector. Dr. Vincent Adams saying that thieves break into West Bank Demerara rice mill twice in the weeks. Escape with cash and court documents. That's on your front page this morning.
Mm-hmm.
That's on your front page this morning. So, these are some of the top stories that are making headlines as you read your morning papers today. Now, let's get right into the meat of it. We have Mr. Winston Jordon in the background. Mr. Jordon, good morning. Welcome to the countdown. This is your first invite to our show since we started. It's great to see you in good spirit. You're still looking like the Winston Jordon, I know.
We're going to borrow the shirts, Winston.
Good morning. No, you can't borrow this short, boy. This short.
No.
You gotta go to South Africa to get it. Because this bought in South Africa during one of my sojourns there. I really love this short. I bring it out once or twice a year. So you put on.
Wow. We're pleasure to have it here with us.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, it's Christmas, boy. It's really Christmas too. Mr. Jordon, we have a lot to unpack this morning. We have 1 hour, and I'm not even sure we're gonna get it in 1 hour, but we're gonna try, right? If you can't get it in 1 hour, we're gonna come on for part 2. But I want to start off first, Mr. Jordon, with a question. Mr. Jordon, in your professional assessment as a former Minister of Finance and an economist, how has the current government been managing the people's money for 2024 as compared to 2023? And what should we be very, very worried about? That's 1. 2, and if the government changes, what steps need to be taken to account for those funds spent, and who should be held accountable if it is found to be mass corruption? Should the new government spend its new term in office wrapped up in that, or just move on with the governing of the country? Those are the first 2 questions for you, sir. So let's start with the first one. How has the government been spending our finances for 2024?
Well, I don't know why you picked 2024 and not say since the government has come to power. I mean,
well, we can take all day with that.
Well, no, but
go ahead.
I don't think we would, because there are some general characteristics since they have come in. At the macro level, the deficit seems to be widening at a time when you have access to enormous resources in the form of oil resources. The deficit seems to be widening, and when you look carefully at that deficit, there are 2 broad categories that are accounting for this widening. One is the enhanced spending on infrastructure at a time when you don't have the skill set to properly implement projects. You see, it is difficult to, on the one hand, say that the capital stock of the country has gone up by the equivalent of the spending this year. But when you check the capital stock for the next year, that very that very infrastructure that you put in has started to deteriorate.
Mm.
You know, you should get from minimal expenditure from new infrastructure for at least 3 years. Minimal. You know, basic. You know, if you do a new road, you're not expected to go back and having to resurface different sections of the road to grade the road because it is found out that it's slippery or too smooth, to grade the shoulders because you find out that when it rains, the rain, instead of draining off, it pools at the side, thus creating a very dangerous situation. So the figures can be very illusory to that extent, that you're spending massively, but the quality of the expenditure in terms of the product that you are getting is not there to match that expenditure. So you have that on the one hand. On the other, on the revenue side, the government has given away massive revenues in the form of concessions to various sectors. And you could see in many cases these were either promised or negotiated, for example. When you look at the concessions given, for example, in the education sector, you remember they had a big brouhaha when we put VAT on private education.
Yes.
That's entire private education in a scenario where the owners of the private school were in a monopolist, oligopolist position. What do I mean? You have massive demand for private education, but few suppliers. And these suppliers, whether they come together or not, determine whatever price is to be paid. So there's a huge gap. There's a huge gap between the price that could potentially be paid and the one that's actually be paid. And so what we as a government decide to do is take a piece of that, okay? Take a piece of that from the owners of the school, not from the parents, and so on. But then you had a big hue and cry, right? And then when we decided now, okay, we're gonna take off the VAT from the school, guess what? Instead of the fees going down, the fees actually went up. And in one case, I understand one of the owners of the school say, you could always take out your child. You understand?
Yes.
Parents came to the government begging us to intervene. Begging us to intervene at the time when they were the ones who think that what that we put on the fees was causing their fees to go up. They came and begged us to intervene in a scenario where they weren't getting the reduction. And when they went to when those parents went to the private sector told them in no uncertain terms that they don't get involved in private contracts and private businesses, right? So it was left to the very same government that they were thinking to go and you know, make representation on their behalf for those fees to go down. But by the next year the fees were in the stratosphere again. When the government came in now, there was no argument that these private schools should be paying taxes, income taxes on profits and so on. But we think the government did. The government, without any howling or anything, removed the entire income tax from the private education sector. And as a gift to the health sector, they also removed the entire income tax from the private health sector. These weren't clamorings that were made, certainly not in our times. But then they removed it. So whenever you remove a tax or give a concession, there's a hole that is left in the revenue base. And unless you intend to fill that hole, you will then have to cut expenditure in some other area. So let us be quite frank about that. Then on the third level is the massive increase in subsidies to the government sector.
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh! Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you look at GPL, for example. GPL has no incentive to perform because if they don't perform, there are no penalties. You know, you go to the Public Utilities Commission, you get a slap every year end, you know, and so on. But Public Utilities Commission cannot do anything to GPL. So if GPL doesn't perform, resulting in massive deficits, it is the government who has to step in and give GPL the financing to cover those deficits. And it's not one. You have GWI. GWI don't even sell out bills anymore. And the bills that they're sending out now, they're in many cases, they are estimating, just like GPL, creating mass confusion among the consumers and so forth. But
and the water is not even good either. The water is coming terribly.
The water
is coming terribly in GWI as well.
Right? Yeah. So when you have these monstrosities called GPL, GWI, and our favorite friend Gaisuku. Our favorite friend Gaisuku. Right? These are government corporations that are sucking the life out of the treasury, essentially, right? And these three corporations are commercial corporations. Well, not GWI is not a commercial, but still GWI is expected to cover its current costs. At least its current costs it is expected to cover. You know, it's a monopoly because it's the only producer of water in the country, right? And as a monopoly, you expect it to cover at least its current costs and some of its capital costs. But the government has forever been financing the capital costs of GWI. And because of the issues with management and efficiency and billings and all this kind of thing, you have problems. Well, I don't have to regurgitate the problems at Gaisuku. That is going to be, if not the death of Guyana, close to it, because now you have a scenario where Gaisuku is going to record its worst production in its history at a time when it has got some of the largest transfers from the government. So you have an inverse relationship that is going on. The more the transfer resources from the government treasury is the less Gaisuku produces. But Gaisuku has no incentive to do better because it's what in economics is called too big to fail. It's a government corporation. Right? If it fails, you don't want it to go under. So the government comes in and bails out, notwithstanding that the government is using up resources that should be used in other areas. So you have, and then you got other areas like transport and harbors department that can never make a profit, you know, and all these. So you have any number of areas that you could think of that the government is subsidizing, and there's no pathway to reducing or eliminating these subsidies. So when you come to the NRF, which I'm sure you're going to ask, you're going to find out one of the reasons why they don't want to delineate exactly what the NRF is spending on. You may very well find the NRF is also being used to subsidize these agencies. So you have a scenario where the deficit, the government deficit of the government has widened, right? Has widened, and therefore, whenever you have a deficit, you have to find financing for it. The problem with the widened deficit is that you can't see. You know, you don't have to be a detractor of the government to realize where is this massive financing going? Where is this massive amount of investment? Where is it going? And what has it been its effect, its impact on the population, not the friends, family, and favorites, the wider.
But Mr. Jordan, let me cut you for a second. Could you put a percentage on the widening of the deficit?
Yes, I had these figures. I had these figures with me, but I didn't bring them on the.
Would you say more than 60%?
No. I use the deficit in terms of GDP.
GDP.
So you have a GDP that is growing, and then a deficit to GDP that is also growing, which means in nominal terms the deficit is widening fairly massively. You understand? Yeah. And if you accept that the government is saying that the natural resource fund is only financing 30% of its expenditure, 30%, and taxes probably financing maybe, let us say, 40, let us say even 45%. So you're borrowing 25%. If you're borrowing 25% annually to finance your government deficit, look at the burdens that you are putting not only in the future generation but the present generation, on the present generation to repay.
Mr. Jordan, you mentioned GWI, GPL, the oil
Gaisuku.
sector,
All the other factors.
What about forestry? What about gold and diamond? What about those mineral forestry?
Yes,
what
but
about those areas?
But you remember I told you, I was just giving you a sample. I was just giving you a sample of agencies that were too big to fail.
Exactly.
Right? GPL, GWI, Gaisuku. They're too big to fail. Such that if they're failing, the government must step in. Forestry Commission fails. If it fails, it fails. It's not but the government is stepping in there. Transport and Harbors Department, again, if it fails, it fails because you have private sector operators in the sector, but the government is not going to allow transport to fail. You understand? And therefore, and these aren't small subsidies of, 30 million here and 50 million. These things run into millions of dollars in subsidies at the smaller level of the Forestry Commission, and billions and billions and billions.
Did they put another supplementary to Did they put another supplementary to Gaisuku in the last parliament there? Did they do that?
I can't remember, but I can tell you that since 2015, when we came into power, to when we left, we had transferred over $60 billion to Gaisuku. Cash. Wow. It comprised roughly 35 billion in actual transfers from 2015 right up to 2017, including transfers for the payment of severance pay and so on. So roughly about 35 billion. And then we took a 30 billion bond, right? A 30 billion bond that we backed as the government. And so when you add the two together, that's in excess of 65 billion that had been transferred under our. And when you add now what this government has transferred since they have come into power, it means that from 2015 to now, Gaisuku would have been the beneficiary from the Treasury of over $100 billion.
Wow.
$100 billion.
Yeah.
And when you look at the state of Gaisuku today, it's worse than when we left in 2022. Check on every metric you will see. It's worse in terms of production and everything else. Gaisuku is using more money to produce less sugar.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Right? Mr. Jordan, in regards to post-crisis scenario, or if you look at how can Guyanese...
Don't jump in yet. I had a second question. Hold the question.
Okay. Good.
Ask me a second question about
Andrew.
About if when they come into power, whatnot, and so on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, look, I can tell you in 2015 when we came in the power, the promises was that we were going to look and find out, whether there was indeed corruption and deal with it. And true to our word, we did. As you know, we conducted a whole set of audits in various agencies and sectors.
Yes.
Okay? And many of these audits were made public. And you saw the extent of corruption and so on that had taken place. And many of these audits were I believe, turned over to SOKU. And a number of the audits were still with the Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Ramjatan at the time, who was scouring them to see what action could be taken. A lot of people say, well, the coalition had an opportunity to bring these people to book and they never did and so on. It's not true. It is not true. First of all, you have to have evidence that can stand up in a court. Not every time you shout corruption. Some of that shouting is normally political. It's political.
Yes.
It's not reality. Okay. If your constituency, if you go to your constituency and say, here, those guys are corrupt, that's what the constituency wants to hear. Right?
Correct.
What they want to hear. But the people who shouting it know very well. They can't prove it. But it's good red meat to the constituency. And so you will hear. So when you go now and you do and thing, it's not that only you can't find it. It's that the records, some of the records will have disappeared, and all these kinds of stuff. But in a number of cases, I think Soku might have preferred charges. There was some issue with the DPP chambers, and the government had to go and recruit special prosecutors. I think we recruited 5 or 7 of them. And there were issues with the special prosecutors and so on. And long and short is that in all the cases, not only all the cases that were brought were dropped or dismissed. Okay? That's the most I could say, because more can be said by Basil Williams or the legal people. But that's all I could say, that all the cases were either dropped or dismissed. Okay? So it wasn't a case where the coalition government did nothing. We did. And I see again, people are hammering and clamoring, you got corruption here, you got corruption there. When you go in, you can get these people. Again, as I said, if you can't find the evidence that can stand up in court, right? If you can't find the evidence that can stand up in court, it is just red meat to your constituency. That's all it will be, essentially.
Miss Andrew, you're on
mute. Leader Nigel Hughes said at one of his press conferences that he will hire international auditors to come and audit the country's finances under the PPPC should the AFC coalition, whatever fraction, wins the elections. Would you advise him to do that, or would you tell him to do another red meat?
I have no problem with that, simply because I'm saying to you, in 2050 we did the same thing. We hired over 35 auditors and accountants to investigate in the various sectors and companies. They investigated Gaisuko, Central Housing and Planning Authority, the Gold Board, all over. There were Gaia Oil, all these different places.
Were they local or international auditors?
They have international and local, because you could have an international auditor, say Pete Marwick. Pete Marwick may have a local rep. Price Waterhouse may have a local rep. You have some of the local firms are attached and aligned with international firms and so on. Yeah. So when Nigel says that he's going to hire international firm, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to go out there and put out an ad in the New York Times or so on. You have the skill set here, but those skill set, when you put out the terms of reference, those skill set maybe need to be supplemented, right, by overseas exports. For example, I do not know whether we really have a trained forensic auditor in Guyana. I don't know whether we have auditors. I don't know whether we have trained forensic accountants. And if we do, how many do we have? Because in some of these things you need forensic people with the extensive experience of where to look and so on. Yes. You hear people got all kinds of bank accounts in all kinds of different countries and so forth. You need a international forensic person with skill set and colleagues and so on, who know where to look, how to match, cross-reference, and all this kind of story. We didn't have that, nor did we have the opportunity of going that road when we came in, because we were in a hurry. And a lot of people don't forget and don't remember that we had a number of pincers attacking us from day one. You had the Venezuelan issue. You had the issue of Gaisuko. A lot of people don't remember that within days of us going into power, the CEO of Gaisuko, who is now the High Commissioner in England, in many ways you seem to get promoted.
I tell you.
Right? He dropped the ball and gone back to New Jersey, only for us to come and find out that Gaisuko, instead of this corporation that they were this lovely news that they were giving us prior to the 2015 election, was a debt-ridden, broken corporation with debts in excess of $90 billion, and could not pay, were not able to pay wages for the last 2 weeks prior to us coming in. People don't know these stories. We've told these stories umpteen times. But had it been told by the PPP, they would gobble it up. They would gobble it up and regurgitate it over and over and over and over. But there's this issue where you have this, this now confirmed view that only one set of people can run this country.
Okay. You come to that. Onyx, you got a question?
Yeah, I have a question in regards to...
That's a confirmed view.
It's a confirmed view. I hear you.
In regards to sustainability and recovery, since we went into all the factors or the primary factors that might cause a detrimental effect in Guyana, in regards to post-crisis, how do you think, how can Guyana ensure that its recovery is sustainable and not just a temporary fix?
I'm trying to figure out the question, unless you make it a bit more specific. What recovery are you talking about? In
regards to the current economic crisis that we have right now. Okay. Inflation and all these different things.
Okay. Well, look, it boils down to economic management. Okay? And economic management is not for the faint-hearted. I just yesterday or the day before, I heard Jagio saying that the payout of let us say the 30 billion that they've gone for this year, that payout not result in inflation. Well, for all the economics that I have done and all the books that I've read, written by all the scholars and so on, it will tell you that if an economy is already overheating, as in the case of Guyana, the economy is overheating. And what do I mean by overheating? It has an excess demand and an inability in the supply side to meet that demand, and therefore, in a market context, the price has to adjust. Hence, you see these inflated prices. There are indeed inflated prices, right? But clearly, you need them for the market to adjust and bring it back into equilibrium or some form of equilibrium. You see these inflated prices for all kinds of things. Building a house that would have normally cost, let us say, $10 million, let us say, even a year ago or a year and a half ago, will now cost you 15 million and so on. Okay? The economy is overheating. And one of the major reasons for that overheating is the government. The government has taken on an ambitious infrastructure program, like I said, that is placing huge demands on skills, materials, machinery, and men, just to use the M's. And when I use men, I mean men and women, but just to use the alliteration of the M's. Okay? And so it continues to do so, notwithstanding every advice that got to slow this program down, because it's going to create inflation. All right? Now, you are already in an inflationary situation because the economy is indeed overheating. And you are going to pump $30 billion before the end of the year into an economy and then tell the people that it ain't going to cause inflation? Well, I give up. You understand? I'm telling you, I give up, because that kind of economics I didn't learn. But maybe he has run a model and it has shown this, when you pump that kind of money into the economy, you're trying to reflate an economy that is either in depression or is sluggish. You understand? And you want to give a boost to the economy and so on. But when you're going to pump that kind of money, at the same time, you are going to pay back pay. At the same time, you have $7 billion that you have not told the people yet what you are going to do with it, but you said at the budget time was for cost of living measures. Well, if you are in today, the 8th of December, and you don't know what are these cost of living measures, and you got $7 billion which you must disburse before the end of the year, otherwise you got to give it back. You got to give it back. So you have all of that money being pumped into the economy, and still you're saying, oh, there ain't gonna be any inflation. Well, as I said, I'm glad I'm a retiree.
Mr. Jordon, I want to know what are the coalition government have done different to stabilize prices and also ensuring growth at the time? Because in from 2015 to 2020, there was no, big influx of or influx of prices, and the prices was already stabilizing in within that time. So what did the coalition did different?
Well, I don't want to let out any secrets, because on my podcast every Thursday morning, people are now calling me and saying, Mr. Jordan, you're talking too much. You're letting out too many things, and those people not paying you for your advice and so on. So
That's correct.
I think I carefully is true. But it's, as I said, it comes down to management of the economy. It requires a trained, experienced person to manage the economy. You understand? And notwithstanding the politicians, I think I'm happy with the role I played in my cabinet. I was no politician. I've never put up my hand and said that I was a politician. I always said I was first and foremost a professional. I give you professional advice, and you can spin it in political terms, but you will implement it from a professional political standpoint. And the point I'm making here is that I use my own training background and experiences a lot, because I've been around a while, to be able to guide the cabinet, through the macro management of the economy. And hence, the 5-year period that we were there, don't matter what they speak, when you look at the metrics of inflation, growth, wage increases, and all these kinds of things, it's second to none. None of them can compete with it. We had inflation for the average, the highest inflation we had in that 5-year period was in 2019 of 2.3%.
Yeah.
Otherwise, to that we had inflation of 0.9%. At one period, I think we were even in depression. It was negative something. You understand? And we were paying salary increases well above inflation. Without
oil. Without oil.
Without oil. And we had some of the lowest budget deficits to GDP. They will never mention these metrics, because it will hit them in the face like lightning, right? But we have to continue saying it like it is, compared to what they are doing today. And let us be very, very, very frank. While there were complaints during our 5-year period, the complaints that you have today, you have oil. Look at the poverty rate, and you have oil.
Exactly.
You have oil, and look at the poverty rate in the 40-something% with oil.
That's because the propaganda machinery is working.
With a natural resource fund that has accumulated $5.5 billion in the history of this country. I do not believe that we have ever had a savings account with $5.5 billion in it.
We're going to come out to the NRF fund, but I got another question to back up you with Guy Suku, that I want to get your take on it, because I need to do a follow up on it. You talk about sugars continue to be not getting to the height that they're talking about in terms of the growth in sugar. We know that the government is using sugar as a cash cow to keep its supporters in that industry quiet, but Guy Suku is feeling miserably every year. Now, Mr. Jordan, your government back then tried to right-size Guy Suku, and the PP made a whole big cry to its supporters, and they had a big protest, and a whole sort of thing went out of control. Now, if you had to advise the new government about Guy Suku after the elections in 2020 about an alternative to Guy Suku, what would it be?
Well, listen, first of all, let us go back to the very stuff that you talked about. Guy Suku was bleeding heavily. I think what too many people are wedded on is what you call folklore. Agreed that our history is inextricably bound up with sugar, right? In fact, Guyana, sugar was what, in a sense, made Guyana. Okay?
Yeah.
But it made Guyana, and it's breaking Guyana. Okay? So what we attempted to do, given what we came in and the mess that we found in Guy Suku, we tried, like any other responsible government, to on the one hand, tried to save the entity in some respect. It could not have been saved in the entire respect. And don't forget, you guys probably too young. But when I was growing up, I think Gaisuco managed 11 or 13 estates. In the 1970s, Gaisuco produced 370,000 tons of sugar. 370,000 tons of sugar. And they managed 11 estates. Okay? Even Jagdeo, when he was president, realized that Gaisuco was failing. And under his regime, they closed 2 or 3 estates. They closed loss-making estates. What you see now is this big diamond housing scheme was Diamond Estate. Was Diamond Estate. And
exactly.
Closed under his presidency. Right? So it is not today that Gaisuco is failing, but there has always been this reticence to do what is to do. You know, if you have a coal, I like to use this analogy. If you have a coal and you dismiss it, okay? You dismiss it. And it's going on and on and on. And it's nagging you. You go and you get some OTC, over-the-counter medicine, cough medicine, and you're drinking it. And it's still nagging, going on and on and on. Finally, when you decide now, boy, let me go to the doctor. When you go to the doctor now, the man says, listen, you have advanced stage pneumonia. You think the doctor can prescribe over-the-counter medicine to solve advanced pneumonia? Well, that is the analogy that we have with Gaisuco. In the early days when Gaisuco was profiting from a hefty sugar price, artificial sugar price, instead of Gaisuco being managed as if it had faced the world market price and then adjusted for part of the windfall, because that it was a windfall that it was getting from the European Union. But that windfall was due to government negotiation and government being a participatory body in the ACP, the African, Caribbean, and Pacific group of states, in the negotiations with the European Union. So when you hear people hollering about how government take a levy and wipe out, the government took what was theirs as being the people who negotiated that price, and they gave Gaisuco part of it. So if Gaisuco had done what I was saying, then there would not have been need. There would not have been need to do the radical surgery that we had to do when we came in. And as such, we decided, look, we are going to concentrate on Gaisuco being a 150,000 ton industry by that would have been 2020 thereabouts, and we are going to close the other 4 estates. The other 4 estates, there were huge interests in those estates, right? But as you well know, when the no confidence motion came in December 2018, and even as we attempted to, let me tell you something. We had to contract Price Waterhouse to come in some valuation, and they took ages upon ages because everything in Gaisuco wasn't as what people said. We don't know what you were selling. You don't know the boundaries of Albion. You don't know the boundaries of Skeldon and all these things. And if you're going to sell Skeldon, what it is that you're selling? You're selling them with the land. You know, and all these different. There were huge problems. But by that time, the PPP also carried out a successful campaign of scaring investors. Okay. Yeah. So when we had umpteen investors lined up and so forth to offer their different perspectives on what they may wish to do and so on, they fell off like flies, right? And so we were left now with Gaisuco, managing them as best as we can until after the elections, when we could have resurrected the whole Gaisuco revitalization plan. You understand? And so that's how you have those 3 industries, you know. And again, as I said, red meat, you go and tell those people you're going to open back all the estates. You knew you were lying to them because you knew what you left. You knew what you left, and you knew you were lying to them, but they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. So it's no surprise, certainly not to me and certainly not to others who were there, to find that they could only open one estate and not even open that estate successfully, because Rosal got even more problems than they probably had before they were open. Skeldon is dead and will not come back again. Wales is dead, and obviously they're showing that it is dead by putting the gas to shore, there, exactly. and so on. So they didn't tell their supporters. Yeah, they told their supporters what they wanted to hear, but they knew very well that they could not, But then, as I said, in this country here, a lot of people think there's only one set of people who should run it, and so. If coalition did something, you make a meal of it. If the PPP does the same thing, well, you have any number of excuses to paint, to put them in a positive light.
Mr. Jordon, I know we're speaking about a lot of red meat, and if it's one thing, we look at the current oil boom that we have here in Guyana, and I want to know, in your perspective, how do we diversify the economy and reduce the dependency on oil while we're speaking about those red meats? Because remember, those are the red meats that brought us to where we are today, the breadbasket of the Caribbean and all these different things. How do we reduce the dependency on oil?
Well, look, I hear. I'm not necessarily repeating what Nigel said, because what Nigel said has also been said by me and many economists before me, and will be said afterwards. Look, what Guyana needs is a long-term national development plan, not strategy. Plan. Strategy are two different things, right? We need a long-term national development plan. 10 years, maybe 15, 20 years will be better, even 25 years will be better. That has the support of a broad-based country. Okay, so even if it is being done, say, by the PPP, it must involve other sectors, opposition, obviously. It must involve the civil society and other such. And when that plan has been put together, it must be put into Parliament and debated and adjusted and so forth. And we must have, whether it's a state planning secretariat or planning agency or so on, with dedicated bright individuals and so on, tasked with executing that plan and updating it annually. Okay, because it is from the plan that you will be able to draw the budget, the annual budget, right? An annual budget must be couched within the context of a plan. That is why at the end of 5 years, you will know, as a result of this annual spending, where we will be or where we should be. And that is why, in the context of being presented about it today, and 3 outer years, it draws from the plan. You understand? The reason I'm saying this is because no matter what I don't want to structure anymore something that says if the coalition comes in again, what it should do. What it has to do has to involve other parts of the country, and major part of the country has to be the opposition. Now, that is rather said than done, because in the early days, President Granger attempted, true to what he said prior to acceding to the presidency, that he will involve the opposition. His early attempts to do so were rebuffed on specious excuses that they were not. Well, the Prime Minister Nagamutu was appointed as our point person at the coalition. PPP used that as a red herring to say, well, they're not going to talk to the coalition because something to do with Nagamutu. You know, all these derogatory things that they were talking about Nagamutu. And of course, President Granger refused to back off where that is concerned, because there was nothing wrong with Nagamutu. He had a stellar political career and record and so forth. So clearly, it was not right. Okay. Then down the road, Jagio made it very plain that he wasn't going to cooperate with the coalition government outside of the Venezuela issue. He wasn't going to cooperate with the thing. And as such, true to his word, all the positions that we had opened on the boards and committees and so on, requiring an opposition nominee, he refused to nominate people to them. In the legislature, where the deputy speaker would normally go to the opposition, he refused to nominate a deputy speaker. You know, people don't remember these things. They don't remember these things. They continue to blame the coalition, how the coalition had its manifesto, it will do this and it will do that, and it never do and never did. It never think constitutional, for example, the constitutional reform. I don't know how you're going to do constitutional reform in 5 years when in any case you need the major opposition party to come along with you. If the major opposition party, you could only carry a horse to the well, but you can't make it drink. You know? Exactly what is happening now. You ain't gonna get any constitutional reform. You could form whatever committee you want, but you ain't gonna get any constitutional reform in this lifetime here of this parliament. You're not gonna get any constitutional reform. But yes, to come back to your thing, you have to have that development plan, and then from that plan you draw annually from it, and again you got to involve the entire society if you want the cooperation to go. Otherwise, every time a new government comes in or a different government comes in, you're going to tear down, tear up, and attempt to start over. And we don't have the resources and time to continue to be tearing down and tearing up, right? For one-upmanship and party-upmanship and so on. We don't, and, you know, and we have gone down that road again with this government here. So what we would do differently is basically, I would suggest, is try to bring the different forces on board. It will be difficult, but it has to. Otherwise, we'll be wasting resources, and then we will only be looking at the short-term view about how to stay in power for the next 5 years, as opposed to how to bring benefits to the large masses of people, right? And you may end up being a transactional government like this government, where your friends, family, and favorites are your decided stakeholders or the focus group that you build, around which you build in.
But as you can see,
Andrew, I know you got blackouts in your deck of the woods.
I just had blackout. You were talking about that just now.
I have it too.
Welcome home, brother. Welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome home.
Actually brought to my car.
I have it too.
Welcome home.
That's how the widening of, as you said, the widening of the economy by the government, the widening of the deficit, it's just widening all the time. It widened to my car as well. So as you can see, Mr. Jordan, I want to come to this NRF issue. In today's Kaicho papers, Starbrick News in the letter column, it says that that the headline reads, "No provisions in the NRF Act granting any role for the investment committee to over withdrawal of funds." That is what Mr. Pakwandin said. He also stated that and I quote, he said, "It should be noted that in the previous version of the NRF Act by the former AP and UFC government, the investment mandate was the function of the Bank of Guyana. In this current PPC version, the investment mandate is carried out by a board of directors that was never in place under the AP and UAFC's version." End of quote. Now, your thoughts on that? And is the country's NRF fund in jeopardy for the future since the PPC got into power, or is it safe? Your thoughts?
On the first part, I hate to really have to respond to Bagondin. You know, a long time ago, I used to write a couple of letters, and he used to jump out as if as if he has been the designated government spokesperson, attempting to rebut some of the stuff. And I decided that I'm not into that foolishness. And I read his letter, and again, it's sort of, I don't want to use bad words and so on. Look, let me say first of all, the whole nonsense about the mandate was with Bank of Guyana and now it's with the board. Exactly what is the point he's making? What is the point you're making? The mandate was with Bank of Guyana, but now it's with a board of directors. What is the point you're making? Let us look at this same so-called board of directors that they claim is transparent. Has anybody, other than a report that they produce after the year is completed, a report that is merely a regurgitation of newspaper articles that you would have already read about the natural resource fund, its inputs, it's how much was paid in by royalty, how much was paid in for profit, and so on. Is anybody aware of the activities of this so-called board of directors? When you look at let me see if I have it here. Bear with me. When you look and see what are the functions of the board of directors, this so-called board of directors,
no opposition MP, no opposition is there. Period.
Yeah, that is my point. So hold on. Let me see if I could find it. Okay. Okay. Here you go. It's at Section 5 of the 2021 Act. It says there shall be a board of directors of the fund which shall comprise of not less than 3 and not more than 5 members who shall be appointed by the president. You see, so they were in the 2019 Act when the Minister of Finance, they claim how the Minister of Finance had superpowers. And not the Minister of Finance necessarily, they claim Jordon had superpowers. Right. I don't know. An act that says Minister of Finance, I don't know how Jordon become the one who going to be there forever and so on. But so they wanted to knock out the Minister of Finance, right? And they said board of directors. But the board of directors has been appointed by the president.
President, exactly.
The president, and what is worse, one of whom shall be appointed chairperson by the president. By the president. Right? So this is a party and a government board. Right? Then blah blah blah. The board of directors shall be responsible for, the overall management of the fund. The overall management of the fund, right? Now, the natural resource fund comprises all of the deposits into the fund and the withdrawals. Okay? Now, the board cannot tell the government when to withdraw and how much to withdraw. Indeed, how much to withdraw is already in the Act. And as you know, this year, they made it worse by how much they can withdraw. So essentially, the board is managing a thin slice of the fund. They're not managing the fund. They're managing a thin slice. No more than maybe 10% of the funds that go into the fund. That's what this high-powered board is supposed to be doing. The overall mandate of the fund. Reviewing and approving the policies of the fund. What policies? What policies of the fund? What policies? That how many times they are going to meet? What are they going to discuss? They're only discussing this thin slice. There's nothing else to discuss. Absolutely, I'm not being facetious, but and since 2022, on my CAMS podcast, I have been criticizing, opening people's eyes about this so-called transparency that they claim. And by the way, before I go on, let me tell you, they pulled 70% of what was in the 2019 Act. 70+% they pulled. And the parts to do with transparency and so on, they knocked them out. And they came up with these specious things that they have in here. And everybody running and hollering it more transparent, it more this and more that. You put it side by side, and let us get an objective, independent, partial observer, and let them compare the two acts and let them tell you. Then number three, it says ensuring compliance. The third function is ensuring compliance with the approved policies of the fund. Compliance by whom? Compliance by whom? Who they ensuring compliance by? With the approved, so-called approved policies of the fund. And where are these policies anyhow? Are they made public? Are they in the Gazette? Is there in a manual with all these policies that they're talking about? Poppycock. Then they said exercising general oversight of all aspects of the fund's operation. This board is exercising oversight over the monies that the government is taking out, that they don't know where the monies are going. Look, it's here in the law. Exercising general oversight of all aspects of the operations of the fund. That the fund meaning the natural resource fund. What oversight is this board exercising over the massive sums of money that the government is withdrawing from the fund and has withdrawn from the fund so far? What oversight are they taking? Yeah. Then the last one they said here. It's a rubber stamp. Terence got a rubber stamp. I ain't copyrighted, but Terence got to pay me since 2022. I said the board and the two committees are rubber stamps. They are toothless and useless where the management of this fund is concerned, and I've been proven correct. People say, "Oh, it's spilled milk and eating and so on." But I mean, you just got to look and see what they put down here. And then the last one they say, ensuring that the fund is managed in compliance with this act and all other applicable laws. Man, listen, and I understand they're getting $100,000. According to Terence, they're being paid $100,000. I don't know. He says he's going to donate it. I presume it's monthly. So you're getting paid $1.2 million for doing nothing, and his own conscience suggests that he can't take that money, so he's going to donate it to Beacon Foundation. The man is absolutely correct. It's a toothless, useless, and the two committees, right? Let me show you something about one of the committees that we had. This is the 2019 Act that I have here, right? We didn't have no board, right? We didn't have no board, and so on. Listen to this. Public oversight of the fund. There shall be established a committee to be known as the Public Accountability Oversight Committee, right? And the Public Accountability Oversight Committee shall be responsible for, listen to this, monitoring and evaluating the compliance of the government and all relevant persons with the provisions of this act, this NRF Act. 2, monitoring and evaluating whether the fund has been managed in accordance with the principles of transparency, good governance, and international best practices, including the Santiago Principles. 3, providing independent assessment of the management of the fund and utilization of withdrawals from the fund. And 4, facilitating public consultations on the management of the fund and utilization of withdrawals from the fund. This committee, this Public Accountability and Oversight Committee, was the real committee. Not the board. Not the board. This was the real committee that we had put in this place. And you know who this committee comprised? It comprised of 22 members of the society. A representative nominated by the Consortium of Civil Society Organizations and Community-Based Organizations. A nominee representing women. A nominee representing youth. A nominee of the Bar Association of Guyana. A nominee of the Guyana Consumers Association of Guyana. A nominee of the Guyana Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative of Guyana. A nominee of the Transparent Institute of Guyana. A nominee of the Guyana Press Association. A nominee of the Most Representative Association of Trade Unions. A nominee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Guyana. A nominee of the Private Sector Commission. A nominee each from the 10 regional democratic councils, and a nominee from University of Guyana. 22 members. They were the real governors of this fund. They
All
were
gone.
of this fund.
All knocked out.
All knocked out.
All knocked out.
Knocked out. Knocked out. Right? And he talks about investment mandate and so on. Let me tell you something. And Terence will tell you. I believe it was last year we met in New York. And we had dinner with some other friends. And I said to Terence, you should not have taken up the opposition's appointment on that committee because it's a useless committee. And he said, no, man, if you don't take it up, then they can claim this. And I said, but on the other hand, if you take it up, you will be tainted. You will be tainted with the same brush of uselessness, right? And so on, right? But we left it at that because he had already accepted the nomination. And just over a year afterwards, he's forced to admit that but I don't think he will stay on eventually. He says he will stay maybe to the end of his term, but I don't think, given his experience, that he'll want to go there. And the opposition has to decide whether, first of all, in general, they're not being consulted, and when they are forced by law to consult, whether the consultations are perfunctory, or whether by joining, you get yourself tainted. Because I heard I have been reading where people says, well, it's good that he was inside so that he could find out. You don't have to be inside to find out. In that particular case, you could be outside there, right outside, and I know. And you don't have to think. And then go back to Mr. Bagoni and Harlem, but the mandate was with Bank of Ghana. But before we left, we signed an agreement with Bank of Ghana. We signed an agreement with Bank of Ghana between myself and the governor. What do you think they did? They then put, instead of the Minister of Finance, they put the chairman of the board to sign the same agreement, to sign back the same agreement. And hoodwinking people that you got the board in place instead of the Minister of Finance.
So, Mr. Jordon, I know we're out of time. We got to get a part 2 of this. But Mr. Jordon, in putting the NRF to a sentence right now, what would you say? How would you sum it up into a sentence and say for the NRF right now?
The NRF, look, the nation of Guyana owes a debt of gratitude for the foresight of President Granger. He was adamant that we put in place a natural resource fund before foresight, and that we save these funds and that we use them constructively and wisely, right? Because in the past, all of the monies we got from sugar, bauxite, gold, and all these things, they were frittered away, right? And we don't have any evidence of how we spent it and so on. So that is the foresight. This government wanted not a natural resource fund. They wanted all the money to go into the consult fund. And you could see the reason why they wanted it. They wanted, as they say, commingled. They wanted commingled.
So they could get it whenever they want.
You could see that why they wanted all to go in. But thank God they couldn't remove the natural resource fund because we had it in place when they could, but they can emasculate it, which is what they did. They emasculated it where they're taking 90% out. There's nothing left for intergenerational savings. There's nothing left for buffer that we had, because we had 3 objectives of our natural resource fund in our 2019 Act. 1, to finance national development priorities, and I'll quickly come back to that. 2, for intergenerational savings, and 3, to act as a buffer in times when prices of oil fall and so forth, so that we don't have to suffer from reduced development and so on. We could draw from the fund. When we put in national development priority, because they copied that from the 2019 Act, they copied national development priority from the 2019 Act. when we put that in, and we had a discussion with the Commonwealth Secretariat Advisor about further defining it. He said, no, we cannot define everything in law. He said what we would do is put the generic national development priorities, and we will develop regulations in which we will put in the granular details of what we mean by national development priorities, how we will account for the money in the budget, including a special line, just like how we do with foreign funding. We have a special line for foreign funding. We will put a special line for natural resources so that we will be clear about what the natural resource funds are financing, and that they can be specially audited and so on. All this should have been in regulations. And we had just started discussions with the Commonwealth about assistance for developing the regulations to the fund. It is unfortunate that national development priorities are today being blamed as this thing. But the general idea was that would have been the granular details of national development priorities would have been put in regulations. And the law provides for the Minister of Finance to develop regulations for the fund. Right now, there are no regulations governing the fund. There are no regulations governing the fund. I like to tell you, under this regime, no regulations will be developed. No regulations will be developed on this fund. None.
Just a cash cow. Just so spend.
It's a cash cow. It's a cash cow, and they have all this nonsense about telling you, oh, it's transparent moving from the natural resource fund to the consult fund. Well, first of all, there's a transit stop. It doesn't go directly to the consult fund, because that suggests that all the foreign currency, because the NRF is in US dollar account, it suggests that the US dollars are then transferred to the consult fund. It doesn't operate like that. When it moves from the natural resource fund, the monies go to the Bank of Guyana, right, to boost our reserves. And the Bank of Guyana will create the equivalent in Guyana dollars and transfer it to the consolidated fund. So there's an intermediate stop. It doesn't go directly from the NRF to the consult fund, right? There's an intermediate stop, and that's where when it gets there now, it's lost. It's lost. You don't know what it's financing, right? You don't know what it's financing. Our thinking when it came to financing national development priorities was that it will finance selected projects and programs, right? Itemized in the budget. So, for example, the Demerara Harbor Bridge, right, would have been financed from the natural resource funds, right? The finishing off of the Letem Road, right? The Georgetown Letem Road, that would have been in the budget. Our new road infrastructure network would have been financed from the natural resource fund. Okay, our hospital improvement program would have been financed from there. The schools, right? Not every school, but the kind of schools in keeping with modern thing that we were trying to put in place would have been financed. So you have those kinds of things. And as you remember, in our manifesto, we talked about the cash transfer. In our 2020 man, we talked about cash transfer. That would have been financed. That would have been financed from the natural. So we had our ideas, not for any and everything to be financed from the natural. We thought about the natural resource fund as a windfall fund. And like all windfalls come to an end. So we wanted to use the windfall for specific things that will help transform the economy in the transformation, that will help in the transformation of the economy. Okay? That is what we wanted to do. But we would manage the economy as per normal, not thinking that we have windfall now and therefore we don't have to manage the economy. We're going to get rid of all the taxes. We're going to give away some concessions. We're going to give away subsidies and so on. We're going to lax in our collection of taxes. No, we will manage the economy in the normal way. And we will treat the NRF as a windfall fund. As a windfall fund. Investing more and more in different securities and so on, and using the income to further our development. That's what you do, and that is how you manage the economy, ensuring that the funds are going in a proper manner. They're identified. There's heavy oversight of the funds, and you have money stashed and put away for rainy days. In development countries, there are many rainy days, and you will need that fund.
Well, it looks like all the rainy days are gonna come and there's nothing to piggyback on when they finish with the fund.
Well, that is you know, I'm afraid because the outlook for next year is for oil prices to go down. And when you think about Trump coming back in, Trump is close to Putin. The war in Russia ends next year, let us say. Russia's oil now is back on the market. You know, and you solve the issues with Iran. Iran oil is back on the market in full rather than having to go wrong in dark corners and so on. What is the implication for prices?
Yeah.
What is the implication of prices? And then what happens to Guyana? We don't have any money salted away of any quantity. Of the 5.5 billion US dollars that we have accumulated so far, how much money have we salted away? Huh? How much money have we salted away? And then it's stuck in treasuries at the Federal Reserve, earning 4-point-something% they said, you know, overnight treasuries. And you're asking and then you're telling the investment committee, as Bagundin tell them, well, you know, you're supposed to be looking at risk of country, you're supposed to look at country risks and portfolio risks and all. That's why investment committees on meet every month can do, rather than worrying about how these funds can be invested. And an important part in the act that has not even been activated is the appointment of a fund manager. The important part in our act and their act, because they copied it from our act, is the appointment of an experienced fund manager. They don't have that. So how the investment committee?
Mr. Jordan, we are way out of time, but I have one last question I want to ask you before we close. So you can give me this in 5 minutes if you want to do that. There's this big row between Barrett Jagdeo and David Patterson about the Exim Bank loan. Patterson is saying, his sources are saying there's no loan being approved. Jagdeo is saying, yes, the Moraro Wave said that the loan has been approved. Follow the Moraro Wave, but he's not confirming and saying the loan is approved. What have your sources been telling you? What have your sources been telling you? Have you heard anything about that?
I dealt with this on my podcast on Thursday morning on CAMS TV. And I'm using my experience as a person who have dealt extensively with international finance institutions, both as a technocrat and as the Minister of Finance and Governor for Guyana on several boards. You see, loan approval goes through several stages, okay? And what Jagdeo may be calling approve, and you know, Jagdeo, as I said on that program, is a former Minister of Finance himself. He's a former governor of these institutions, and he is the present governor. He is the present governor of these institutions. I'm not talking about Exim Bank, but you know, World Bank, IMF, Caribbean Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank. He's the governor. He's Guyana's governor on those boards, and he's aware how loans are approved. They go through several stages. One of the penultimate stage. The penultimate stage is the loan approval committee. Now, Exim Bank, what has happened is that similar to a loan approval committee in the international financial institutions, Exim Bank may have a similar such committee. And the loan went to that committee, it was considered, and the recommendation is that we're not going to give you 660 million, we're going to give you 500 million. Guyana, Jagdeo, I believe at this press conference 2 Thursdays ago or so, it said 509 million or something like that. Well, anyhow, what's a $9 million between friends? Either it's 500 or 509 million, the loan committee recommended. So at the loan, what I discern is at the loan committee level, the loan might have been approved in principle. It has been approved to move on to the next stage, right? Now, apparently the next stage is notification to Congress, and then awaiting Congress formal approval or rejection. And then that goes back now to Exim Bank, where it will now be considered at the board level. If Congress approves it, then I believe it might be rubber stamped at the board level for approval. But that approval by the board meets again apparently in, I think it's January or February. All right? So until the full board meets and approve the loan to Guyana, the loan has not been approved. And the other thing is this, I said on that podcast and I say on yours, It is unusual for the government to be announcing a loan approval by an international financial institution. It's unusual. Usually what happens when the board approves, as soon as the board approves, there's a PR that's attached to the board, and they issue a formal statement. They make a formal release. And it's on the basis of that release that the government of the borrowing country will inform their press and their cabinet and whoever else. So it's rather unusual for Jackie to be saying that Exim Bank has approved this when Exim Bank itself never made any such announcement. Now I know when the board approves, Exim Bank will make a formal announcement that the loan to Ghana for 500 million or 509 million, whichever it was, US dollars, to be approved. And the other story I raised on the podcast, I expect you to listen to this, is that he consistently says that it's retroactive financing, that the loan will finance things that the government has already spent on. No, there's a gray area that is concerned. Assuming that Exim Bank does indeed finance retroactive financing, there are clear issues involved. One is that for you to get retroactive financing, you have to follow the identical rules of the Exim Bank. You can't follow your rules. You have to follow the procurement rules of the Exim Bank. Two, the expenditures have to be eligible expenditures. Okay? They have to be eligible expenditures. You have to keep a proper record of all the steps and so on. And at each stage of the way, you have to have approval by the Exim Bank Procurement Committee that it's consistent with their rules and so on. And finally, there's a limit to how much retroactive financing you can get. The whole loan can't go to retroactive financing. There's a limit to what retroactive financing you can get. So all of these things have not been made clear to the public, but we get the impression that once they get this loan, it could be applied retroactively to monies that we have already spent. And I'm indicating to you the clarity with which these issues have to be dealt with as such.
Mr. Jordon, thank you very much. We are out of time. We're 1 minute out of time, but we got a part 2 on this because we have a lot more to ask you, but we're going to come back probably in the new year because this month is almost done. We're going to come back and we're going to continue with our discussion. But it's a pleasure having you on the program, and we want to have you enjoy the holiday with your family and friends, and see part 2 of our discussion.
Thank you very much, and to all the viewership and so on to do enjoy the holiday in gay abandon, but in peace, health, be careful. And hopefully we'll see each other in the new year.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Jordon.
Thank you very much.
You got something coming up as well. Tell us about it. You got some fundraising activity coming up. What is that?
Yes. Yes, Andrew. The YFC has a takeaway lunch coming up on the 21st of December. The Youth for Change, the youth arm of the Alliance for Change. So we have a takeaway lunch coming up on the 21st of December. Tickets are only $2,000. So if you are, on the 21st, you don't feel like cooking Christmas time, Christmas season, you can always stop by at the office. That's 26 Railway Embankment there, Kitty, and pick up a lunch, pick up a food, pick up your takeaway lunch at the Alliance for Change Center for Change office.
What's it cost?
$2,000, cheap and sweet. $2,000.
And we also have our friend Mr. Dummett also having another fundraising activity as well. Let us play that tape. Hear what he has to coming up as well.
Foodies! Dumbest Tasty Delights presents Lunch to Go fundraiser on Saturday, December 21st, 2024. Lunch will be served from 12:30 up until 5:30 p.m. Venue, Lot 166, Campbellville House. $1,000. For more information, call Damien 622-5741 or 6. Win a 32-inch smart TV. Dumbest Tasty Delight Lunch to Go.
So when you finish with when you finish with the YFC takeaway lunch, you can go across the Dumit and enjoy something. Blessing in takeaway lunch and supporting our own. So that's it for us this afternoon. Well, it's not afternoon yet. It's 11:26. It's still morning. Afternoon for some other folks around the world. But we have blackout in the city.
Yes.
We have blackout in
all across Guyana.
And the power ship and shipping. Have a blessed afternoon, everybody. And we're going to see you back here next Sunday for another edition of the Countdown. Good afternoon.
See you later, guys. Have a good one.